Hi everybody, I'm super excited to present to you the 25th installation in our Famous Artist series. This one is all about Louisiana artist George Rodrigue. He's best known for his blue dog paintings. If you're familiar with them, awesome. If not, as soon as you get into this unit, you're going to become quickly familiar and you may realize, oh wait a second, I have seen this guy's stuff before. Now, this unit, as I've set it up, is broken into 4 distinct work sessions. In this video, I'm going to kind of give you an overview of how I set that up. Obviously, if you need to change it a little bit for your setting, you should be able to. In a perfect world, the 4 sessions I have set up would be about 40 to 45 minutes long. So just be aware of that. The other thing that I want to explain before we go any further is that George Rodrigue's artwork is protected by copyright. So he's one of those artists that I have to be really careful how I want to share with you what I actually use in my room. And as an educator, you know, we're able to go online and copy whatever we find and put it into slideshows. But with an artist whose stuff is protected by copyright, I have to be careful about how I share that with you. So if you've seen any of my units before that are focused on artists whose stuff is protected by copyright, I sort of found a workaround, but it does require a little extra step for you at the very beginning. I do not recommend doing this live in front of kids. It's not that complicated, but it does take a minute. So I do recommend that you open up the resource. You'll see throughout the slideshow that there are gray boxes wherever I show an artwork to my students. So what I did was I put a little hyperlink right under that gray box, and that if you click on that hyperlink will jump you right to that exact image file online. You just will need to copy it and put it into your resource. You as an educator are within your rights to copy stuff you see on the internet and use it with your kiddos. But once I'm sharing it with you as a commercial product, that's where it gets a little weird. So I wish that I could save you the trouble and just hand you the file as I use it. But we have to kind of, you know, respect obviously the copyright laws of an artist. That's something we should respect either way. So just be aware of that. In your resource overview, I kind of listed all those links. So it shouldn't take you more than, I would say, 5 minutes to kind of copy those images into your own slideshow and then resave the slideshow as a new name, just so that it's all kind of saved in there. But just be aware that's there. The other thing that I would highly recommend you do before you hit the ground running with these, with kids, is set up some stencils. So this unit requires the use of a stencil. It's a little dog-shaped stencil in the style of blue dog. And what I did was I include a printable in the file that has 3 dogs on it. I would print enough copies of that paper to where you can hand every single kid one of these. I printed on manila, like tag board, and then cut them out. That takes a second. Maybe you could have one of your 5th graders or a parent dividend help with this part. But the good news is once you have a class set, you can use it for years. So while it is a little extra step at the beginning once, it's a good investment because then you have this resource for a long time. Now, the way I make it last for years and years and years is that I coat this. So the deal is you're going to be laying this on a piece of paper and then using a sponge brush to paint like around it. And if you paint on any kind of paper, tag board included, that paper tends to curl and then all of a sudden it's not really a great stencil anymore. But I've learned from trial and error that I spray clear spray paint. I lay them all out, big piece of cardboard outside of my classroom, and I spray them with a clear coat, it doesn't necessarily have to be clear, I guess, of spray paint. And that, it needs time to dry, obviously. You can flip it over and do the other side if you really want to be careful. But that alone keeps the stencil from curling once the kids apply tempera paint to it. So I highly recommend doing that so that you can make use of these. Another option would be to paint them with Mod Podge. You could laminate them if you want to. I'm concerned with the lamination idea of just would moisture get in if you're really trimming this close for the stencil outline, but just get creative with that and coat these so that you really can have a resource that's going to last a long time. Okay, so those are the kind of things that you want to kind of be aware of before you even start. That's some kind of prep work that needs to happen. But Once you get that stuff done, the rest is smooth sailing. So you're going to be presenting a digital storybook all about George Rodrigue, and he is he was an artist who painted all about his Cajun culture, his heritage, the landscapes, the people, the stories he heard growing up. And you're going to be telling the kids that he, originally his goal was to illustrate a painting of a folktale, a Cajun folktale called the Loup-garou. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. That seems to be how I hear it online. But the Loup-garou is a French word for werewolf. And the story is that this werewolf comes out in the night, on a night of a full moon. And George Rodrigue is quoted as saying his mother, when he was little, would tell him that the Loup-garou would come and eat misbehaving children. So you want to make sure you present that in kind of a fun, lighthearted way so that you're not freaking out your students. But you very quickly say, of course, George Rodrigue understood this wasn't true, but it would still trigger his imagination. What would that Loup-garou look like? What do you think the Loup-garou would look like? And you get them kind of thinking about it, and they have fun with it. I haven't had any kids react in a frightened way, but I do make a point to really present it in kind of a fun, lighthearted way. So I recommend going that route. But know your audience, and if you've got some kind of, timid, kind of frightful little kids, maybe, I don't know, prep them in advance or something like that. Anyway, then you present how the first picture he made, his blue dog was his interpretation of the Loup-garou. So you will then show them a bunch of slides that kind of transition of how that painting went from representing this folktale to kind of taking on a life of its own. So then you transition into the very beginning of the studio project, which will have them kind of creating a blue dog inspired work of their own. Now, that involves laying this on a sheet of 6x9 construction paper. It should be about this size. This is a used one, but they would lay it right here. They would use a sponge brush, and they literally just kind of make a kind of a reverse print of the dog. That can then be set somewhere to dry and reused later. But once they have the outline, while they have a little bit of white paint still, I use white, then I recommend getting a paintbrush and having them paint on the little snout of the nose, and it'll prompt them to glue on 2 yellow hole punched eyes. And then they leave that to dry. There is an early finisher option, which puts a bunch of like accessories up on the screen, and there's a printable, it looks like this. You can also have them trace the stencil that they just used on the beginning of the studio project. And the idea is that they make the dog any color they want, and they can add accessories. You're showing them all kinds of examples of blue dog, as a pilot, and blue dog as an astronaut, and blue dog as a, there's so many examples of blue dog in different kind of get-ups. So the idea is for them to come up with one of their own. And that's just if time permits. That's just kind of, if you have a few early finishers, don't stress over that part. Like I said, you could hand them a blank piece of paper and just have a few of them have fun with that one. If not, everybody ends up with time. You can also use that as an early finisher in any of the other sessions of the unit. So when they come back for session 2, you're going to have them you're going to present a quick fun fact and a read aloud. And the read aloud is a book by George Rodrigue. It's called Why is Blue Dog Blue? It's a cute book, and it exposes them to lots of different colors. So, blue dog isn't always blue. Sometimes he's red, sometimes he's yellow. And so you're just having fun with it and kind of reviewing different colors, chartreuse and burgundy and kind of sort of those lesser known colors. What else is there? There's lavender, and a lot of them they've heard of before, avocado, alabaster, but there's some unique names in there that's kind of just exposure to lots of colors in the artist's world. So they're going to then transition into some drawing work. There is a step-by-step guide in the slideshow that will walk them through using a Sharpie marker right on their dried print from session 1 and adding all the details of the face on this dog. it's perfectly acceptable for them to kind of take it in a unique direction if they want to. But the step-by-step guide sticks to the basics, inspired directly by George Rodrigue's actual blue dog image. And that should take you to the end of session 2. That drawing work is detailed and kind of takes kids a second to get through. There is an early finisher option on that session as well. And that one doesn't involve a printable. It's a drawing prompt that just says, what if Blue Dog wasn't a dog? And so there's a bunch of other animals, an octopus, a cat, an owl, and they're blue, but they have those same kind of blue dog penetrating yellow eyes. So the idea is that they would just kind of grab a piece of paper and sketch a different animal with the same look. It's a fun one. Kids have, it's just one of those prompts that inspires them to come up with all kinds of creative ideas. So again, that's just optional. You can just give that to the few random kids who finish early if time permits. So then in session 3, you're going to be showing them a couple of Rodrigue's later works. His backgrounds in his later works got a little less, I don't know what the word is. There were fewer like accessories. It wasn't so much Blue Dog in a costume to align with a certain theme. It was more of a painterly background. And so you're gonna kind of expose kids to the idea of that sort of abstract background. And they're gonna actually in session 3 use a sponge brush to really pull out the background. So here's an example. And so you can see some of the Sharpie work from session 2, but in session 3, that's where you're giving them a paper plate and some tempera paint and a sponge brush, and they're kind of just using the sponge brush around that basic dog shape and adding color. Now, they can do it in a variety of ways with a variety of colors. You're giving them a variety of paper choices. I don't know if I mentioned that for the dog in the first place. So you really do end up with a nice wide variety of outcomes for this project. And if some of them get, really hung up on the idea of, well, I want to make him look like he's at a birthday party, or I want to make him look like he's, snorkeling or whatever, you can certainly allow for them to add any accessories you want. But that's all time permitting. A lot of kids really take their time with this painting part. It's really fun for them to, just that act of applying paint. They enjoy it, mixing colors. So they may end up just spending the whole time focusing on that, and that is perfectly okay. So once you get through that, you are going to move on to session 4. Session 4 involves the basics that I always include in the final session: a lesson review, an opportunity for an art show. Both of the review and the art show include some prompts that I'm putting there for you, just as sort of suggestions on things you could be asking them in a review, or discussion prompts during an art show. But that's all customizable too. Feel free to sort of flip those out. I put blank slides in the resource so that you could add your own details into each of those sections and kind of customize that if you want. There's also a self-assessment. The self-assessment, so let's see if I can pull it up on the computer, has 4 little statements, and they're basically rating themselves. The first one says, I used a stencil and a sponge brush to create a basic dog image on my paper. So that's where they're kind of reflecting on what they did in session 1. Did I get that basic stencil painted? The second prompt says, I followed a step-by-step guide to define the details of my dog's face. So that's where they're thinking about, how did I handle that Sharpie step where I was trying to go in and really work on the face? The third one says, I used at least 2 paint colors to fill in the background of my design. So that's where they're thinking critically about, how did I do during session 3 with my background? And then the fourth one, I use my materials carefully and try my best on this project. So that's where they're thinking about their own efforts and craftsmanship, that kind of thing. There's a spot on the self-assessment to leave individual comments if you have time to do that. That would be awesome. You can print the self-assessment out It's the same format as they always are with my other units, but you can also just project it on a screen and kind of walk the kids through it step by step and have that be more of a conversation if you don't want to deal with printing all those out. I sort of am 50-50 about that. If I have time and ink in my printer and paper, then I'll go the printed route, because I think it is a nice advocacy piece for sending home with the finished project. Kind of helps parents understand what all went into this. But the reality is that that is all, a process, and sometimes it's quicker just to talk the kids through it. So your call on that one. Oh, I put in one little early finisher at the very, very end, and it's just a staring contest. The kids love staring contests, and you can have a little tournament style if time permits. It's just for fun, and there's just like a screen of Blue Dog's eyes kind of staring out at everybody. And so the idea is that they use that as inspiration to kind of look and stare at each other and just have a fun staring contest. That's it for this unit. I hope that you guys have fun with this. I would love feedback. If there's anything you have tried in the past that works really well, or questions you have, please never, ever, ever hesitate to reach out. Hope everyone's doing good, and I will check in with you next time.